Bunny, I'm going to say this one time. That necklace isn't yours. My mother gave it to me. She didn't even look up. Sweetheart, we're family. Family doesn't keep score. My husband was standing right there. He had a drink in his hand and he didn't put it down. Nora, it's jewelry. Don't make this a thing. I didn't make it a thing. I didn't say another word that night. I smiled at people. I thanked the caterer. I waited 11 days. And then, in a ballroom with 200 people in it, I let his own family do it for me. If you've ever been the person who kept the peace until there was nothing left of you to keep it with, stay with me. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Here's what happened. My name is Nora Vance. I was 34 that year, and I sold commercial real estate in Savannah, warehouses, medical office parks, the kind of buildings nobody photographs. I want to tell you about the house first, because the house is where all of this lives. I bought it when I was 29. A narrow brick row house on Habersham with a courtyard the size of a parking space and a kitchen that hadn't been updated since 1974. I paid for it myself, not with help, not with a gift, myself. The 4 years before that, I ate dinner standing up. I showed properties on Christmas Eve because nobody else would. I drove a Corolla with a coat hanger for an antenna to meetings with men who called me honey before they learned my name. I'm not telling you that to impress you. I'm telling you so you understand what that address meant to me. It wasn't square footage, it was proof. I met Grant Whitaker 2 years later at a closing dinner where he was the only person who asked me a question about myself. He was easy the way some people are easy. He made a room feel warmer just by walking into it. We married 14 months after that, in the courtyard, with 40 people and a string trio, and my mother crying in the second row. My attorney, Adele Fontaine, drew up a prenuptial agreement. I almost didn't sign it. I sat in Usher's office with the pen in my hand and told her it felt like planning a funeral before the wedding. She said something I didn't understand until much later. It isn't about what you think he'll do. It's about what you'd have left if you were wrong. I signed it. Then I put it in a drawer and did my best to forget it existed, because I have never once been able to hold suspicion and love in the same hand. You have to understand what the Whitaker name is in Savannah. Raymond. Whitaker started Whitaker and Sons with a truck, a ladder, and a phone book. 40 years later, there was hardly a block in the historic district that didn't have his crew's work somewhere inside the walls. In a town like ours, a name like that is collateral. It gets you a table, it gets you a loan, it gets you the benefit of the doubt before you've said anything worth doubting. Grant grew up inside that name, the way some people grow up inside a house. I don't think he ever noticed he was in it. And then there was his mother, Bernadette Whitaker. Everybody called her Bunny, including her doctor. The first time she came to see our place, she rearranged my kitchen cabinets while I was on a call. I hung up and the glasses had moved. The everyday plates were where the platters had been. She was drying her hands on a towel and she said, "You had them all wrong, sweetheart," in the same voice you'd use to tell somebody their slip was showing. I laughed. I actually laughed. I told Grant about it that night like it was a funny story. He said she was only trying to help. That was the first time I heard that sentence out of his mouth. It was nowhere close to the last. She called the house Grant's place. Not once. Every single time. We're headed over to Grant's place. How's that courtyard doing at Grant's place? Grant's place needs new gutters. Has he told you? I never corrected her. Not once in 2 years. I told myself it was a generational thing. I told myself she was from a time when the man's name went on the deed, and that was simply how the sentence got built. I told myself correcting her would cost me a whole Thanksgiving, and letting it go would cost me nothing. I have spent most of my life doing that math, and I have almost always done it wrong. There's a particular kind of woman who gets described as easy to get along with, and I was her. I was the one who moved the meeting. I was the one who took the middle seat. When my parents fought, which was rare and quiet and about money, I was the one who came downstairs and made a joke until the air changed. I was raised to be reasonable. I want you to understand that before anything else, because it explains everything that comes after. My birthday that year fell on a Sunday in March. There was no party. My mother doesn't do parties. There was a pot roast and a coconut cake made from a recipe card in her own handwriting that had gone soft as cloth from being handled, and 4 people at a table built for 6: my father, my mother, Grant, me. After the plates were cleared, my mother went down the hall and came back with a box, not a gift bag, a box, navy velvet, worn pale at the corners, the kind of box that has been sitting somewhere a long while, waiting for the right day. "Sit down," she said. "Let me do this before I lose my nerve. I have to tell you about my mother before I tell you what was inside it. Otherwise, it's just jewelry. And it was never just jewelry. Eleanor Ellison, everybody calls her Nell. She married my father when she was 20, and she never worked a day outside that house. And I want to be careful with how I say this next part, because I know what it sounds like in this century. It was not a bad marriage. My father is a decent man. Walter Ellison has never raised his voice to her, never spent a dollar she didn't know about, never made her ask twice for anything she needed. But, for 40 years, everything in my mother's life had somebody else's name on it. The car she drove for 19 years was titled to my father. The house she painted and patched and kept, his name on the deed. The savings account she balanced every Sunday at the kitchen table with a mechanical pencil and a paper ledger, his name, her handwriting. Nobody did that to her. That's the part that took me the longest to understand. There was no villain. It was 1974, and that was simply how the sentence got built. And by the time the sentence changed, she had already been living inside it 30 years. You don't move out of a house you've lived in that long just because somebody mentions the door isn't locked. And then, at 58, my mother walked to the bank. She didn't drive. She walked 11 blocks in August in Georgia because the car was in his name, and I think some part of her needed the whole thing to belong to her, including how she got there. She opened a checking account. Her name. Only her name. She didn't tell my father. She didn't tell me. For 6 months, nobody on this earth knew that account existed. She fed it the way you'd feed a stray, $12 from the church bake sale, a tax refund she'd been told to spend on herself and never had, the change out of the coffee can over the stove, once, $40 a neighbor paid her for hemming a wedding dress in one night. She was not hiding money from my father. I want that understood. When he found out, he laughed and asked why on earth she hadn't just told him. And she said, and this is the truest thing my mother has ever said out loud, because then it would have been ours. It took her 13 years of dollars and dimes to buy the thing she set down on that table in front of me, a diamond pendant on a fine gold chain. Not enormous. She had chosen quality over size. The way she chose everything, and she had chosen it alone, and she had paid for it in a single transaction with money that had never once had another name attached to it. She turned it over in my palm so I could see the back. 2 words. Engraved small, yours alone. There's a card, she said. Under the liner. Don't read it now. Read it when you're by yourself. I read it in the car. She'd known I would. It said, something no one can ever argue is yours. Mama. Before we left, she took both my hands, and my mother is not a woman who takes hands. I was 58 before I owned one single thing that was only mine, she said. You're 34. Don't let anybody talk you out of it. I said I wouldn't. She held on a second longer than she needed to and said, I kept everything. The receipt, the paperwork, all of it. It's in the tin in my closet. I told her she didn't need to keep receipts for a gift. She said, a woman my age keeps things. Grant carried the box out to the car for me. He said it was beautiful. He said it 3 times, in a voice that was already thinking about something else. Here is what I did with it. I brought it home. I read the card once, and I folded it exactly the way she'd folded it, and I slid it back underneath the velvet liner. Then I put the whole box in the floor safe under the shoe rack in my closet, and I closed the door on it. I did not wear it. Not that spring, not that summer, not one single time. I told myself I'd wear it when I'd earned it. That's the kind of thing you say when some part of you still doesn't believe you're allowed to have nice things. It started on a Tuesday in April. That's the honest answer. It probably started long before that. Tuesday is only when I finally looked. I came downstairs at 6:40 for an 8 o'clock showing. The first thing was my foundation. It sat on the bathroom counter, turned the wrong way, label toward the mirror instead of the wall. I'm particular about small things. And when I picked it up, it was light. Not empty, light. The way a bottle gets when somebody has been generous with it for a week and you haven't noticed. Because you only ever pour out a dime's worth. The second thing was the coffee cup. Kitchen island, half full, gone cold, pink lipstick on the rim. I want to be precise here, because this is the detail I came back to for months afterward. Grant drinks his coffee black. Grant does not wear lipstick, and I don't own that shade. A bright coral pink. The kind of pink a woman my mother's age wears on purpose. The machine on the counter had not been switched on. Whoever drank that coffee brought it in with her. The third thing was a towel. Guest bathroom, damp, bald on the tile, still cool in the middle. I stood in that hallway holding somebody else's towel and ran the arithmetic I'd been running for 2 years. For the first time, the numbers came out somewhere I couldn't live with. Then I opened the door to the garage. My car was gone. I checked my bag anyway, because that's what people do. My keys were in the inside pocket where they always are. Then I looked at the pegboard by the door, at the little brass hook where the spare had hung since the day I moved in. The hook was empty. I called 911. I want you to hear me say that. Because of what people assume later, I did not sit down and cry. I did not text my husband. I stood in a cold garage at 20 of 7 in the morning, and I reported my vehicle stolen, and gave the dispatcher my plate number in a voice steadier than I felt. Officer Reyes came out in about 40 minutes. I was maybe 30, careful, the kind who writes down more than he needs. He walked the garage. He looked at the hook. He asked good questions and never once made me feel like I was wasting his morning. Then he asked who else had a key. I said my husband. He asked whether my husband might have given a key to anyone, and I heard myself say, out loud, for the first time, his mother has one. He gave it to her about a year ago. He never told me. Officer Reyes stopped writing. Ma'am, he said, and he said it kindly, which somehow made it worse. Your husband gave his mother a key. In this state, that's consent. This is a civil matter. I asked him what I was supposed to do. He said I could talk to an attorney or to my husband. He put the clipboard under his arm and walked toward the door. And I stood there in my work clothes, feeling like a woman who had called the police on her own family and gotten laughed out of the room. I got as far as the driveway. Then he turned around and came back a few steps. "Off the record," he said. "Start writing things down, dates, times, what's missing. Keep it somewhere that isn't the house." I asked him why. "Because people like that don't stop when you ask nicely," he said. "They escalate." Then he left. And I did the showing at 8, and I sold the building. The car came back at 4:15 that afternoon. It was parked crooked across the driveway. One wheel in the grass. The driver's seat was pulled up close enough that I had to move it back to get in. The radio was on a station I don't listen to, and the volume was up loud. Bunny was on my sofa with her shoes off. She was wearing my sunglasses, pushed up into her hair, and she had my lipstick in her hand, the good one, the one I keep in the drawer and not the purse. She was putting it on without a mirror. She saw me and she didn't hurry. "I raised the man who married you, sweetheart," she said. "I think I've earned a cup of coffee in his house." Grant got home at 6. I met him in the hallway and I did not raise my voice. He listened to about 40 seconds of it and then took my elbow and walked me into the kitchen, away from the living room, which is its own kind of answer. "She was only trying to help," he said. "I said she took my car without asking." "You make good money, Nora." He was already turning toward the refrigerator. "Don't cry over a tank of gas." I told Camille about it the next morning. Standing at the printer, she let me finish. Then she asked, "Did you press it? With the officer? Did you push?" I said no. She asked why not, and I heard myself say something I hadn't known was in me. "If I push, it becomes real." Camille didn't blink. "Nora," she said, "it's already real. You're just the last person still pretending it isn't." Sunday dinner at the Whitakers was a standing appointment, and I never once got out of it. Raymond carved, Bunny talked. There were always cousins. Whitakers breed cousins the way other families breed opinions, and the whole thing ran on a politeness so thick you could have stood a spoon up in it. Nobody argued at that table. Nobody said anything true at it either. That Sunday, Bunny told the story about the gutters. She told it to a cousin named Dell, loud enough for the end of the table. How she'd been over at Grant's place and noticed the gutters were pulling loose on the north side. How Grant's place has such good bones, but nobody's kept up with it. How she'd told the boy twice. Grant was 2 seats away. He heard every word of it. He reached for the rolls. I want to be honest about what I did, because I've thought about it more than I've thought about anything else in this story. I said nothing. I sat at that table with the deed in a fireproof box 11 blocks away, and I let a woman tell 9 people that my house belonged to her son, and then I passed her the green beans. Afterward, I went out to the back porch for air. Raymond was already there with his pipe, looking at the yard. He didn't turn around. He didn't ask how I was. We stood there in the kind of silence men his age are comfortable in, and women my age are not. Then he said, "You remind me of somebody." I waited. "Not my wife," he said. And he tapped the pipe out on the rail and went inside. I didn't know what to do with that. I carried it home and set it down somewhere in the back of my head, and it stayed there, unopened, for a long time. I put up cameras that week, 2 of them, the kind you order online, one in the living room, one in the upstairs hall. I looked up the law first. In Georgia, one party has to consent to a recording, and in my house that's me, not because I decided anything, because a police officer had told me to write things down, And I am the sort of person who follows instructions. 3 weeks later, I was in Atlanta for a commercial brokers conference. My phone went off during a networking break. Standing in a carpeted hallway with a name tag on and a glass of bad Chardonnay in my hand. Motion. Living room. I stepped into a stairwell and opened the app. Bunny came through my front door with 3 women behind her. Grocery bags. Nobody took their shoes off. I watched her walk to the wine rack and pull the bottle out of the 3rd slot, a 2009 Barolo I'd bought the day I closed my first building over $4 million. I had never opened it. That was the whole point of it. She opened it in my kitchen with my corkscrew and poured 4 glasses. Then the upstairs camera picked them up. She walked them into my bedroom. She opened my closet. She took my handbags down off the shelf, one at a time, and set them on the bed like a display. And the 4 of them stood over them the way people stand over a casket. One of the women asked how a girl that young affords a bag like that. And Bunny said, in my bedroom, holding my wine, "Half of everything in this house is my son's. I'm just enjoying his half." I thought that was the worst thing I'd hear that night. It wasn't. 11 minutes later, the hall camera caught her bringing one of the women back up the stairs, just the 2 of them. She walked her into the closet doorway and pointed down at the floor, at the shoe rack, and the microphone caught it clean. 4 words. That's where she keeps it. I sat down on a concrete stair in a hotel stairwell in Atlanta and watched that clip 4 times. She knew there was a safe. She knew where it was. She knew there was something in it worth walking a friend upstairs to point at. There was exactly one person on this earth who could have told her. That was the night it stopped being a rude mother-in-law. That was the night it became 2 people who had talked about it. I called Grant. I got about a sentence and a half in. I heard him say my name in that flattened voice, the one that means you are being a lot right now. And then nothing, just the little tone. He hung up on me, and that was the moment I stopped arguing. I want to tell you I cried in that stairwell. It would be a better story. I didn't. I went back to my room. I opened my laptop. I moved my flight from Friday morning to Wednesday night, and then I sat on the end of the bed with the screen light on my face and started a list. Something in me had changed temperature. For 2 years, I had been hurt. Sitting on that bed, for the first time, I was organized. I landed Wednesday night, and I did not go home. I checked into a hotel on Bay Street, ordered a club sandwich I didn't eat, and worked the list until 2 in the morning. By Thursday at noon, I had a locksmith, a security installer, and a 9 a.m. Friday appointment with Adele Fontaine. The locksmith came first. He pulled every lock in the house and put in ANSI Grade 1 deadbolts with keypads, the commercial-rated kind. The ones I spec into office buildings, front, back, garage side door, no keys at all, nothing left in the world for a brass hook to hold. Then he showed me the part I actually paid for. Every code that opens that door is logged. Time, date, which code, and the system pings my phone the second a door opens. Here's what I want you to understand, because people get this wrong. I did not change the locks and leave my husband standing in the driveway. I couldn't have, legally, and I wouldn't have if I could. Grant lived there. A man who lives somewhere has the right to walk in the front door, deed or no deed. And any attorney in this state will tell you the same. So I gave him his own code, his birthday. Actually, he could come and go exactly as he always had. He just couldn't do it quietly anymore. I didn't lock him out. I did something worse. I made him visible. The camera installer came. Thursday afternoon, hardwired this time. Not the two plastic things I'd ordered off the internet. Front door, back door, living room, hallway, kitchen. Georgia only needs one party to consent to a recording. And in my own house, I'm the one party. I checked. Then I had Adele check and put it in writing because I wasn't going to build a case that put me in the wrong. And then I did one more thing. There's an outlet down near the floor of my closet, behind the shoe rack, the kind you never look at. I put a camera in it. It looks exactly like one of those square white plug-in chargers, the sort that sits in every guest room in America. It has a lens the size of a peppercorn, and it points at one thing on this earth, the floor safe. I sat on the closet floor for a while after the installer left, and I remember thinking I'd finally gotten ahead of it. I wired my house against a woman who wanted my things. It never once occurred to me to wire it against the man sleeping next to me. Friday morning, I sat in Adele Fontaine's office and told her all of it. She listened the way she listens, which is without a single facial expression, and then she took her glasses off. Nora, your prenup protects you in a divorce. It does nothing for you while he's still living in the house. What you need is a post-nuptial agreement. She set the glasses down. And honestly, what you probably need is a decision. I looked at the wall behind her for a while. Draft it, I said. I don't need it yet. I just want it in the drawer. She wrote that down. She didn't argue with me. I've thought since that she'd seen 100 women say some version of that sentence and knew there's no shortening the road. Grant came home Friday at 6:40. His code worked. Of course it worked. My phone lit up on the counter next to my hand. Front door, Grant. Second occupant, detected. They came into the living room together, and Bunny had a casserole dish, which I think was meant to be an olive branch, and landed like a flag being planted. Grant said the locks were new. He said it like a question that was really an accusation. I had put a copy of the deed on the coffee table before they got there. It was already sitting square in the middle of it. I turned it around so it faced them, and I put my finger on the line where the owner's name goes, and I held it there. There's one name on this, I said. Nobody comes into this house unless I've said yes. Not next week, not with a casserole, not ever again. Bunny started to say sweetheart. I said, Bernadette. I'd never once called her that. It stopped her the way cold water stops you. Grant got loud then. He talked about family and about how I'd embarrassed him, and about how none of this would be happening if I could ever just let one single thing go. And then he ran out. That was the strange part. For 2 years, every argument had ended with me apologizing to a man who had a reason, standing there in front of a piece of paper with one name on it. He didn't have one. There was nothing to say back. He kept starting sentences and finding the ends of them missing. He took his bag into the guest room and shut the door. I stood in my living room and listened to the house be quiet. I thought I'd won. I thought the danger was outside now. I slept in my own bed that night for the first time in a month. A month went by and the house got quiet in a way I mistook for peace. Grant stayed in the guest room. We were polite. And on the second Saturday in October, Raymond and Bunny Whitaker were having their 40th anniversary at the club on Bull Street, 200 people, a band, a seated dinner. I had made them a video. I want that on the record. 3 days before, I had gone to the club and sat down with their event coordinator, a very kind woman named Sharon, and asked whether I could play a short tribute during the toasts. Old photographs, Raymond's first truck, Bunny at 23 on a church step. Sharon put me on the running order and gave me the input for the projector and told me I was sweet to think of it. I was still trying. That is the part I have the hardest time explaining to people. That Saturday morning, I went into my closet and opened the floor safe because I had decided to wear my mother's necklace. The first time, 7 months of telling myself I hadn't earned it. And I'd finally thought, it's their night. My mother will be there. I'll put it on. The box was there. I picked it up and it was wrong in my hand before my brain caught up. That particular lightness, the same lightness as a bottle of foundation. And I remember thinking not again, which tells you how far down I'd already moved my own floor. I opened it. Empty. The little slot where the pendant sits, holding nothing. And then I saw the corner of the card, still tucked under the velvet liner where I'd folded it back 7 months before. He took the necklace. He left the note. He never even lifted the lining. Something no one can ever argue is yours. It was still in there. It had been in there the whole time he was kneeling over it. I sat down on the closet floor with my back against the shoe rack, 6 inches from a white plastic charger I had almost forgotten about, and I opened the app on my phone. There were 9 days of footage. I found it in 4 minutes. Tuesday, 10:12 in the morning, I was in Pooler showing a warehouse. Grant comes into the closet. He kneels down. He unfolds a piece of paper. I knew what it was before I went and looked. And I went and looked anyway. Bottom drawer of the desk in the office. The safe manual, and on page 11, the corner folded over on the paragraph that explains the manufacturer's factory override code. He didn't crack anything. He read the instructions. He'd gone and found the manual, and folded the page, and put it back. I have heard a lot of people since then explain to me what a man does in a moment of weakness. A moment of weakness does not include research. He didn't hesitate. I watched it 4 times. Not because I doubted what I was seeing, because I was looking for a pause. 1 second where he thought about me. There wasn't one. He knelt. He typed. He took it. He stood up. He left. 11 seconds. I wasn't crying about a necklace. I was crying because 11 seconds was all I was worth. Then I opened the credit card app. Because by then, I was the kind of person who checks. Thursday, 2 days after, $41.38 at a jewelry counter in the Oglethorpe Mall. He'd bought a box. He left my mother's box in my safe and went and bought a cheap one to hand her in. And the only reason my mother's card is still in my possession today is that he never once looked underneath the lining of the thing he was stealing from. I did not go find him. I did not call him. I made 3 calls, in this order. The first was to the Savannah Police Department, non-emergency line. I reported the theft that morning. I gave them the make, the appraisal, the account it was purchased from. They gave me a case number, and I wrote it on the back of an envelope and put it in my clutch. I want to be clear about that, because of what people assume later. It was not a threat I was holding. It was a thing I had already done. The second was to Adele. Take the post-nup out of the drawer, I said. And start the other thing, she said. All right, that's all. She'd been waiting a month to hear it. The third call was to my mother, not my father. I thought about it for 1 second, and I called my mother. Mama, I said, do you still have the receipt? 3 seconds of nothing on that line. I could hear her kitchen. Baby, she said, I've kept every receipt out of that account since the day I opened it. Can you and Daddy come tonight? What do you want me to bring? Everything with your name on it? Then I called Sharon at the club and told her I'd swapped the file. She said, no problem at all, hun. Same slot? I said. Same slot. I hung up. I sat down at my vanity, and I turned on the lights around the mirror, and I started putting on my makeup. The ballroom on Bull Street has 18-foot ceilings and a plaster medallion in the middle of it that people photograph more than they photograph each other. 211 people sat down to dinner. Grant took the microphone at 9 o'clock. He was good at it. He has always been good at it. He talked about a woman who went without so her son wouldn't have to, who drove a car with a hole in the floorboard for 9 years, who never once in her life put herself first. At the round tables, aunts were dabbing at their eyes with their napkins. Then he took out a small navy box. I watched him open a $41 box in front of 200 people and lift my mother's necklace out of it. I watched him walk behind his mother and fasten it at the back of her neck while the room made that sound. Rooms make. Bunny put her hand up to her collarbone. She turned her head and she looked out into the crowd until she found me, and she smiled at me, just a little, just enough. That's when my mother stood up. Nobody in that ballroom knew who she was. A 71-year-old woman at table 9 in a navy dress. She had made herself on a machine older than her marriage. My father squeezed her hand one time and let go. She walked up there slowly. She took the microphone the way you take something you have never held before, because she never had. "My name is Eleanor Ellison," she said. "I'm 71 years old." The room went quiet in stages, table by table, like lights going off down a street. I opened my first bank account when I was 58. It took me 13 years to save what's around your neck. Somebody's chair scraped and then stopped. I have the receipt. I have the certificate. Both of them have my name on them. And I brought them because a woman my age learns to keep things. She was not angry. That is what nobody in that room was prepared for. She sounded exactly like a woman reading a grocery list. "There's also a card that goes in that box. It's still in my daughter's safe. He didn't take that. He never looked under the lining." Then she turned, and she looked at Bunny, and her voice did not go up at all. "Would you turn around, please, ma'am? There's something written on the back." Nobody moved. Raymond Whitaker got up from the head table. He crossed to his wife, and he turned the pendant over between 2 fingers. And he leaned into the microphone and read it out loud. "Yours alone." I didn't say a word. I have never said less in my life. I looked at Sharon standing by the AV cart at the side of the room, and I nodded once, and the screen behind the stage came on. 11 seconds. No sound, no caption, no title card. A man in a golf shirt kneels down in a closet, unfolds a piece of paper, types on a keypad, lifts something out with 2 fingers, stands up, and walks out of frame. Then the screen went black. 211 people did not say anything at all. Raymond did not explode. That is the part I think about most. He stood there in front of his own anniversary and he was calm, because he had been getting ready for this for 3 weeks. And I did not know that until it was happening. 3 weeks ago, he said, I heard my wife on the telephone with my son, discussing what was inside another woman's safe. He said he called Walter Ellison the next morning and asked whether the Ellisons had paperwork for anything they'd given their daughter. Walter sent it to me. It's been in my desk since the 9th. Then he said his attorney was at table 4 and had been all evening. He fired Grant from Whitaker and Sons, standing up, in a tuxedo, in front of everyone he had ever done business with. He said the trust would be amended in the morning. His wife and his son removed from it, both. That was already drawn. Someone at the back said his name, Ray. Come on, not here. I'd rather lose one night, he said, than lose the name it took me 40 years to build. Bunny was crying by then, not the pretty kind. I gave you 40 years. Raymond, what was I supposed to have? Anything you wanted? Bernadette? He didn't raise his voice either. Neither of them did. You just decided it was easier to take hers. She reached up behind her neck. It took her 3 tries, because her hands were going, and when the clasp finally gave, she didn't hand it to anybody. She set it down on the edge of the podium like it was hot. I walked up there through 211 people. I picked it up. I did not put it on. I put it in my clutch, and I closed the clasp on the clutch. And I came down off that stage and walked past my husband without turning my head. He said my name once. I kept walking. That was the last thing he ever asked me for that I said no to. It was also the easiest. Her car was in my driveway before ours was. She must have left the club while people were still standing up. She was on the walk in her good shoes, and she came at me with both hands out. And she got hold of mine before I decided whether to let her. She was crying. She said she never meant for it to go like that. She said she'd just gotten caught up in the moment. She said the word family 4 times in about 90 seconds. I took my hands back. Not roughly. I just took them back. I'm not going to call the police on you tonight. Bernadette. I watched her whole body let go of something. Her shoulders came down 2 inches. Then I finished the sentence. I already did. This morning, the case number is on the counter if you'd like to write it down. Grant found me in the kitchen 20 minutes later. He apologized. I'll give him that much. It was a real apology, in the sense that he meant it while he was saying it. He talked about pressure. He talked about what it's like to be the son of a man like his father and never have one single thing to hand anybody. He said he was going to get it back. He said it twice. I slid a folder across the counter. He read it standing up, waiver of any claim to the house, all of it. The deed, the equity, homestead rights, all of it in language. Adele had spent a month sharpening. No person enters the property without my written consent. His family, named. He got to the last page and he looked up at me. And what was on his face was relief. He thought it was a second chance. He thought a woman who hands you paperwork is a woman who is planning on you still being there. He signed every page. He signed the last one twice, once in the wrong place, and apologized for that too. At 7 the next morning, Adele Fontaine had him served with a petition for divorce. The postnup was never mercy. It was housekeeping. It was making sure that when we walked into that courtroom, there was nothing left for him to reach for. He didn't sign a second chance. He signed a receipt. Now here is the part nobody puts in these stories. I lost things. Meredith and I had been friends for 10 years. 2 days after the party, my phone lit up with her name, and it said, "You humiliated him in front of his entire family. I hope it was worth it." I never answered it. I read it more times than I want to admit to you. I slept in the living room for 3 weeks. I could not go into that bedroom because the closet is in that bedroom, and the closet has a floor in it, and I would lie there in the dark and see a man kneeling on it. The house I had fought that hard to keep became a place I walked around inside of. And the third thing was the biggest, and I still don't have it back. For 34 years, I was a woman who believed that if you explained yourself clearly enough, and calmly enough, and often enough, people would eventually understand. That woman was patient and generous, and she was wrong. And I miss her anyway. Raymond called on a Thursday. He didn't apologize for his son. He's too honest for that. And anyway, nobody can apologize for another grown man. I spent 40 years managing that woman, he said, telling myself the next thing would be the last thing. Don't build a life out of managing somebody. Nora, there's no end to it. I told him he was welcome at my table for Thanksgiving. He was quiet for a while. Then he said thank you, in a voice that didn't sound like a man who runs anything. My mother called the day I filed. I told her it was done. 3 seconds of nothing on the line. Good, she said. And then, I'm sorry it took me 40 years to learn what you learned in 3. Mama, I said, you're the reason I learned it at all. 3 weeks after that, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, I opened the floor safe and took the necklace out and put it on, and I drove to work and sold a building. I stopped keeping it in the safe. Things you own are meant to be worn. Things you're afraid of losing are just things that already own you. My mother's note is in my wallet. It's still there. Being reasonable is not the same as being good. For most of my life, I couldn't tell the difference. Boundaries aren't walls you build against people. They're the shape of the room where you're still yourself. Have you ever had to change the locks on somebody you loved? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and I answer them. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and turn on notifications. Next week, I'm telling you about the sister who showed up to the reading of the will with a lawyer. Thank you for listening.